going on, everybody? Zack Rosenblatt here with Mike Kaye, the latest episode of the No Huddle Show. We got the first practice of OTAs in the books. I won't be spoiling Game of Thrones this week because I saw in the comments that it made some people pretty angry. I thought everybody watched it already. That was my bad. I won't spoil the finale. Mike and I weren't happy with it, though. We'll say that.
I mean, it was what it was. I mean, based on the season itself, it was whatever.
Yeah. You can see his takes on Twitter. He has all of them firing out.
Yeah.
Or he did on Sunday, at least.
Yeah. There was a lot to get out.
Well, there's a lot to get out. There's a lot to get out about OTAs, too, though. I mean, it's just one practice, but we got to overreact to everything we saw there.
That's what you call a segue. But, yeah.
It's overreaction team activities, right? Isn't that what it stands for?
Yeah, exactly. Gotta tell you.
Your first Eagles OTA, right?
Yeah.
On the beat, at least.
Yeah, on the beat, yeah. It was interesting. It was...
I mean, we were just talking about the difference in media contingents between this and Jacksonville. I tweeted there's probably like in the range of 30 to 50 media members at the first OTA practice.
So, like, what's weird is... So this is... When you even just look at team, every coach handles OTAs differently. This is my third coach that I've been under with an OTA. Like, This was about in the middle of a Doug Marrone to Gus Bradley OTA, really. Gus Bradley, you could go on the field and...
Oh, you mean in terms of, like, access and stuff?
Yeah, as far as access and, like, the temperament. Like, Gus would come up and talk to us for, like, 20 minutes during practice.
Oh, yeah, we pretty much don't exist relative to the coaching staff. Yeah.
Well, and with Doug, too, you could walk around the fields. So we're all on one sideline. We're all seeing basically the same thing.
Yeah,
so the access is kind of different. If you noticed, I was walking around. I take attendance before OTAs every single day because it helps my brain and I know what's going on. It's just like a checklist that I do because I'm OCD about it. But I just thought it was interesting how many people were out of practice or were only limited.
There's a lot. And especially so it's hard to gauge like the depth chart and stuff. Yeah,
right. So that kind of played into it. Also, I think what was interesting too was they brought in Casey Tucker on Tuesday. He's an undrafted offensive lineman. They now have 18 offensive linemen. But the thing is, with Brooks, Peters, and Lane Johnson sideline, they have 15 guys, so they can really fill three different units. Yeah. So I thought that was kind of interesting. I didn't think anybody really stood out. Like, Carson got some, like, heavy praise from other outlets that I don't know what they were watching.
See, the thing worth getting excited about is the fact that he was out there without a knee brace, full go for the first time in an offseason since 2017, which is crazy. I think he mobily looked as good as he's looked in a while. Like, that's all. Like, he was rusty, but it doesn't matter on the first OTA. Like,
yeah, I mean,
it's not like he wasn't an MVP quarterback on day one. Like, that's fine.
You tracked his numbers, and I think he completed 13 of 19 passes,
which isn't great.
I mean, it isn't great against Yeah, you
have to factor in the defense in there too. Like, the corners look good.
He missed his first 3 throws. He had a couple of wide open misses. That said, like, he looked fine. I just don't... You can't go away from an OTA practice being like, oh my God, he looks great, or oh my God, he looks terrible. But that was kind of the reaction, like you said, overreaction, team activities. And
we're going to get that going.
I was just kind of like, But if we want to overreact, here's something we should overreact to. There was a significant number change that was made over the weekend.
Number analytics, as they say at Bleeding Green Nation.
Charles Johnson, not Charles Johnson, right?
He changed his number,
Yeah, Charles Johnson went from, like, number 3 to number 84.
That's huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Huge.
He already had a chance of making a team, but now.
Even bigger, DeAndre Tompkins went from 1, sharing a number with the punter.
Not a good look.
To 81. That is
Add an 8. That's all you got to do if you're a receiver. Add an 8.
Huge. I mean, like, I think we could already fill out the depth chart right now.
Number 1? I mean,
but speaking of that, you and I wanted to get into something that's very interesting at the wide receiver position. Let's talk about that a little bit.
So this is actually going to be a true crime podcast today.
Sorry, we're so gleeful
because we were excited about our terrible joke about this idea. The curious case of Mack Hollins, or the disappearance of Mack Hollins.
Ooh. gone Mack as the.
So I asked Doug a question at the press conference, purely like to see where he's at in his development, and like kind of wanting to know if they're worried based on the fact that he missed all of last year. And he basically admitted, like, yeah, he's still rehabbing. We want to make sure he's 100%.
To give you perspective on this, because Zach's the one that asked the question, so when you ask a question, it obviously makes sense to you. But like to literally everybody else in the room but Doug, it was very clear that you were asking, hey, how is he developing as a wide receiver?
Yeah.
And he literally...
He took it as, like, I'm ignoring all of that. He's not playing. So,
right, yeah, which is hashtag not a good sign.
Yeah. So I went back and, like, found all the quotes from basically the last year, because it's been, like, such a weird saga that, you know, the running joke in, like, not only the media, the fan base, too, is, like, are we sure he's alive? Like, has anybody seen him physically? And I saw him, like, from a distance at NovaCare last week.
Yeah.
Like, that's the closest I've come to seeing him. There's been other confirmed sightings. But, so I thought, I wanted to go back and just, like, tell you guys the progression of, like, how they've talked about him. Because it goes downhill, like, real fast. It's like an up and down, like, roller coaster. It's like, so, like, dating all the way back to, well, so first of all, I think, like, towards the end of the 2017 season, he had hernia surgery, which wasn't the same injury that Doug Peterson made sure to point out at some point. That wasn't the same injury he was dealing with this last year, which we were told is a groin injury. We don't know anything else. Groin often is a moniker for a certain area of the body. I don't know if that's what's hurting him, but okay. So on May 29th, Mike Rowe. So that's OTAs last year. Mike Rowe talked about how you'd like to see a guy make a jump in his second year. Well, I hope he'll do that. All right, that's reasonable. You have Gunter Brewer coming in, his college receivers coach. He looked pretty talented in his rookie year with the Eagles. Then you skip ahead to training camp. Alshon Jeffery's out for all of training camp. So Mack Hollins is getting the first team reps to start out training camp. That's big. This is good progress for him. Breakout year, Mack Hollins. August 6th, Mike Rowe. We have high hopes for Mack, and he was certainly a big part of what we did last year. Like all young players, we want him to elevate his game and continue to find his role and help us win football games. Fast forward a couple weeks. August 21st. This is from Doug Peterson. So he's progressing, and we'll see where he's at. So he missed practice. He had missed like a few days of practice. I think he played like 14 snaps in the first preseason game, had one target, no catches. Never played in a preseason game again, by the way. So he must have suffered it at some point that week. So he's talking about how Mack is going to be a valuable part of their special teams, and they want to make sure he's 100% to start the season. That's kind of what Doug said the other day again. August 28th, someone asked what's going on with Mack Hollins. It seemed like he was back at practice, and he was not back at practice. He kept being active and inactive. He's another one with a lower body injury, which is Doug's way of saying anything below the waist is how he was hurt. He doesn't give us any info. He's feeling good right now. The rest has really helped him, and I expect him to be back going into the regular season. September 3rd. So is Mack Hollins going to take a full workload yet, or do you have to continue mixing him in? I don't really want to comment on Mack's status right now, but he's working hard to get himself healthy for the first game. September 4th. Someone asked if it was related to the sports hernia surgery, and Doug's like, no, it's not related. That was at the end of the season. That's not the reason he's been out. Not telling us what's going on. It's like getting fishier and fishier. You know, the mystery keeps going. September 19th. The season's already started. Oh, no. Actually, I skipped ahead. So September 4th was that question. I think that day or the next day, Mack Hollins says, yeah, I'm ready to go week one. I don't know if he said I'm 100%, but he sounded like he was talking, like he was ready to go. We get to game day. You weren't even here yet at this point, right? Mm-hmm. And they put him on IR that morning. I think it was that morning. Can you do that?
Yes.
You can. Okay, so that they put him on because it was a Thursday game.
No. They do.
Well, it was a Thursday game.
You have to. Yeah, that morning you can because it's the Thursday game.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Because otherwise you'd have to do it before Saturday, right?
Saturday at 4.
Yeah. So they put him on IR that day. It was out of nowhere because he had told us the day or two before that he was going to play. So then you cut ahead to September 19th. He's on IR. You can return a guy from IR. At that point, him and Mike Wallace are on IR. So Doug's getting asked that every other week. So who's coming back? All right, September 19th. We'll make those decisions later in the year. October 19th. Both those guys are doing well. We're not at that point yet with them. Once we cross that bridge down the road, I'll be able to give you more information. Spoiler, we haven't gotten more information. November 5th. We're hopeful those guys will return at some point, but when that time comes, we'll cross that bridge. November 29th. Both guys are doing really well, but they're not there yet. December 21st. We're still evaluating that. And now we're at, what's today's date? It's May 23rd. We still haven't talked to Mack Hollins since before week one.
I have never...
Doug Peterson just told us he's still rehabbing. What is this groin injury?
I've never had a conversation with the guy, and I've been
you haven't.
Yeah, so...
I mean, he's a fun personality. We both are anti his new hairstyle.
Oh, man, no.
we won't hold that too much against him, I guess.
I mean, that's all he's been able to do since he progressed with. Since he's now.
I'm at the point now where, like, everybody kind of assumed he's going to make the team. Are we sure he's going to be on this team this season?
So, I don't want to speculate, but I can... let me give you a story about a guy who had a groin injury and then actually, like, just missed, and his career's basically done. I'm not going to name the player. So, I was covering the Jaguars one year, and they said that a guy had a hand injury. Okay, cool. Whatever. We're not going to ask about it. He's a third-string player. We get to right after training camp, final cuts, whatever, he gets put on IR. Never heard about him again. Like, never. Turns out the guy had a, like, complete tear of his groin. He hasn't been heard of in the NFL since. So it could be that we think groin and then we immediately think sports hernia, but sometimes it's more complicated than that. So maybe it's... like I said, I don't want to...
Well, that's the thing. Like, he had the hernia thing, and Doug's like, no, this is different, so...
Yeah, so, I mean...
That's the weird part. Like,
that's the tough thing, because the NFL, one, you have, you have laws, medical laws about...
What's it, HIPAA or whatever?
Yeah, you have HIPAA laws, and then you also... you also don't want to give away strategic information. Not that anybody's game planning for Mack Hollins, but... You've got to treat all your players pretty similarly,
I mean, clearly it's serious enough that it's almost been a year.
Yeah, I mean...
And, like, he was dealing with something during training camp last year, and I don't know if he aggravated it that first preseason game. It kind of seems like it based on how the reps just kind of went out the window, and then all of a sudden he was out for the season. Like, something happened.
Yeah,
I don't know if it was off the field, if it was in training camp, like...
Well, didn't he just ride 15 miles?
Yeah, he did. I forgot about that. That's a part of this investigation. Like, that's curious. Like, if he has a groin, maybe it's not the groin injury anymore. I don't know.
I know that when I ride a bike for at least 2 miles,
I'm sore before I get on the bike.
Yeah, so. It's a groin injury.
15 miles.
Yeah. My wife was like, "Yo, we should buy tandem bikes and just go to, like, the Jersey Shore." I'm like... I don't want to be put on IR like Mack Hollins.
But yeah, I mean, that was what? That was over the weekend?
That was last week.
Yeah, it was last week.
He's essentially become a mascot because he is doing a lot of, like, stuff on their social media.
He's just theoretical at this point until we see him out there.
He's kind of taken Jordan Mailata's place as the guy that just does stuff for the website while he's here. And
I mean, and Doug like made sure to emphasize that, like, OTAs are important, but they're not, like, that important in terms of, like, he's not necessarily a veteran, but guys like winning a job or losing a job. But he hasn't been out there again in a long time. And then you have a guy like Charles Johnson who's coming in. He's more experienced than Mack Hollins, actually. Shelton Gibson, who's been around the team and practicing. You have Braxton Miller, who was around the team and practicing all last year.
I really like DeAndre
Tompkins, who, he's getting an opportunity to prove himself. He's a fast guy, and that's kind of Mack's thing, is that he's fast and can help on special teams. And if Tompkins can do that as well, like, obviously, we don't know what the injury is, and you can't rush it back, and you don't want to hurt yourself more, blah, blah, blah. But his job security is going down the longer he's out. Like, that's just the reality, even if that stinks.
Yeah, we don't know if every coach shares the same philosophy, but Doug Marrone wouldn't allow us to call OTAs practice when he was there. He said, you won't win a job here, but you can definitely lose one. And, it's... In one way, it's good that they're not rushing him back, like you said. We even said it's not a concern with Carson Wentz unless he misses mandatory minicamp. Well, that concern's out the window. There are other guys that are suffering injuries. It's good to get the reps from the younger guys. They only have They only have 2 rookies on the roster at the wide receiver position, so it's not like they're hurting for reps for the younger kids, but you want to see what Charles Johnson can do. You want to see what Greg Ward can do. You want to see what all these other guys can do. The problem is you're not seeing what Mack Hollins can do, and that could be detrimental going into training camp.
I mean, I want to look up quick. So, the last game we would have played in is the Super Bowl, so that's February 4th, 2018 was the last time he was, like, in a game.
Yeah, I mean, it's rough.
Well, I guess the preseason game, but he only played limited and didn't get a catch.
Here's the thing. And I interviewed Josh Perkins about this. I've interviewed a couple other guys coming off injuries this year. they're all ready to go. Like, they're pretty much good to go if they got injured during the season. I think the only guy that really wasn't in practice that suffered a major injury last year were, well, I guess Darby and Mills. You know what I mean? Like, Josh Perkins is back. Corey Clement.
I mean, him and McLeod were like in the warm up part, and then they weren't practicing. But that's a good sign that they were out there.
Right, exactly. There's guys. I mean, Darby's running around, so Darby was at practice.
Yeah.
So Mills was like
Mills is also like it's like a secretly like another strange one because that he suffered that injury against the Jaguars, I believe, right before the bye, and they kept saying, you know, it'll be a few weeks. All of a sudden, he was on IR. He only played half the season. Like that was a strange one, and he was on a boot as recently as like a month ago.
Yeah, and Mills was a guy that a lot of us talked to in the locker room, just say, hey, how you doing? He seemed like he was in the
I saw him in the locker room when we walked in the other day, and he didn't have a boot on, but he wasn't practicing again.
Yeah, he didn't have a boot. He was doing stuff for the autism race when he didn't have a boot on either. So, I don't know. This team is very weird with the way they handle their depth chart. It also seems like some players kind of know where they stand with the team, which isn't really great when you're going into OTAs.
This early.
But again, Mack Hollins, it's just so weird. Like, it's one thing to not like talk about a player, but to have so many mixed signals about a player is very.
And the way he's just like, I'm sure he's around the team. Like it was like it was like the thing with Jernigan. Like we never saw him until he was like the week before he was back, pretty much.
Yeah, I know for a fact he's talked to DeAndre Tompkins because Tompkins was trying to figure out a living situation, and then Mack, of course, in all of his wisdom, said, "Hey, you should just live near the facility and get a bike."
Yeah.
And so he said that during rookie minicamp, which I thought was funny. But
and that's when I saw him from a distance. So there's multiple sources confirming that he's alive.
There's layers. There's layers to this reporting.
But like joking aside, like it's just a strange situation. Like that's.
I mean, it's a strange situation. We've devoted 12 minutes talking about Mack Hollins.
But who else is investigating this? Nobody.
But it is like very bizarre. I mean, it really is.
This is gonna be the next serial podcast. When he retires before the season or something.
Mack Hollins files. So talking about OTAs.
What are some here? So you said there's no like stars, but I would say one guy that like I think everybody agreed stood out was Dallas Goedert.
Yeah, Dallas Goedert and Avonte.
He looks. Again, it's OTAs. Like, we're overreacting. We accept that as long as you guys accept that for everything else we say. Dallas Goedert's the best tight end in the NFL. Okay, I'm just kidding. Legitimately, though, like, I came out of that. I know it was one practice. He talked about how he wanted to get bigger, faster, stronger this offseason. I thought he looked bigger, faster, and stronger. He caught everything that was thrown his way. There's one play where Carson Wentz, had a weirdly placed ball out of Zack Ertz in their red zone drills, and it, deflected off Ertz, and Goedert, was there. He grabbed it, took it in the end zone. This kid has the potential to be a top 10 tight end by the end of the season in the NFL, and the Eagles have two of them. It's nuts. They need to get that guy the ball.
Do you think he was listening to a lot of Kanye West? Bigger, faster, stronger?
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah, he looked great. There was the one play. So if Goedert's your guy that you took away from having a great day, Avonte Maddox.
Yeah.
Oh, my gosh.
They're two rookies from last year.
Yeah, and they're buddies. And
yeah, I see them tweeting at each other all the time. It's pretty funny.
They had a so Avonte Maddox and Sidney Jones collided with Zack Ertz during red zone 11 on 11, and the ball went up in the air and was almost picked off. And Dallas Goedert, out of nowhere, just reaches for the ball, grabs it, and walks into the end zone for a touchdown. I thought that was a really interesting play from the day. But yeah, so that's a lesson in kind of trading out of the first round. That trade is turning out
those
to
are the two guys.
Unbelievable. Yeah. Well, they got
and Miles Sanders, right?
Yeah, so they got
their future starting running back. Who would be a starting tight end in 30 other or 25 other teams in the league, and you got Avonte Maddox, who might be arguably their most important defensive player if you look 5 years down the line.
Yeah, I think they nailed that trade.
Yeah.
Even if Miles Sanders is a 1B guy for the rest of his career.
I mean, they have a guy on a rookie contract for a while, so.
Right.
4 years. And Maddox, by the way, they had at the number one. I mean, again, everybody's injured, but they had him at the number one nickel spot, which is at least interesting. Because Sidney Jones was there.
So Jones and Douglas were outside.
Yeah.
But
if they viewed Jones as the top nickel, you would think they would have put him at nickel.
because Maddox has played outside. I think this, from my optics, I do think Jalen Mills will be the starter going into training camp. I think Darby will be a starter, and then I think Maddox will be nickel. I think Jones will back up Mills, and Douglas will back up Darby. I don't think it's going to be...
LeBlanc will back up Maddox.
Right. I think that's the way they're going to do it.
That's a ridiculous depth chart.
I mean, yeah, they've got a good depth chart.
Yeah. Josh Hawkins, okay. You kidding me?
Josh Hawkins actually played Josh Hawkins stood out to me. So did Jeremiah McKinnon. Jeremiah McKinnon almost had 2 picks in that.
I forgot they even had him on the roster until recently.
Didn't we all? But, they stood out. I thought Alex Singleton, the former CFL player.
Your boy?
Yeah, he had a blitz in 11-on-11 that was so fast. Like, it was almost like he was offside by 2 seconds. That's how fast he got to the Seinfeld. And if it would have been a live practice, he would have killed him.
Yeah. Thought the defensive ends looked pretty good. I saw Sharif Miller get pretty close to a couple sacks. I call Josh Sweat was getting some pressure. Jordan Mailata, by the way, on the flip side of that, he was playing right tackle with the first team. Vaitai was right guard. Dillard was left tackle. Was there anybody else different? That was the substitutes. Mailata looked, considering he's only played, again, we talk about it a lot, he looked solid. He clearly has a lot to learn, but I think that it's really smart what they're doing there, because right now, it doesn't really matter if you're impacting Vaitai's future, because he's not going to be here after this year, so you use him as a guard. He's a backup who can play everything. You're developing Mailata as the future swing tackle, and you have Dillard who's developing to replace Jason Peters. Like, this is a good time of the year for that offensive line to learn all that stuff.
And from an athleticism standpoint, I really like that Mailata is getting some reps at right tackle.
Yeah.
Vaitai looked good. Obviously no contact, whatever, but he was getting off the line pretty quickly. He was attacking really well. He had one pull that looked very clean. Whatever. I think he's going to be the starting right guard in week 1 if Brooks isn't there. And I think that's the right move. I think the idea of having Wiz be the ultimate interior backup always is a very smart move. You don't want to get weaker at 2 positions at once. So if Kelsey went down, you put in Wisniewski. If Isaac Seumalo goes down, So I think that's smart. Again, I think that the Eagles are doing a lot of the right things, except for talking about Mack Hollins, obviously. Also, I want to talk about this. So a lot of people look at the numbers game, and we brought up the 18 offensive linemen, and that seems really excessive. It is. But when you consider that they're not testing specialists, and they have 5 returning tight ends who have all been in the system for at least 6 to 7 months, what else do you want them to do? They have a ton of wide receivers. They have definitely really good...
There's not really that many open roster spots, so why would you waste a body?
Right. I think the offensive line is really important to figure out. They've got 6 guys that are guaranteed on the roster. I would say Vaitai, if he's not traded, is guaranteed to be on the roster, so that's 7. You're going to keep 9 to 10, depending on if Brooks starts on PUP. So, those last 2 spots are important, because not only are you preparing for this year, but you have to have some young guys that you develop. Jason Peters is going to be replaced by Dillard. That's fine. But Mailata might not be your swing tackle. You don't know. Lane Johnson is 1 suspension away from being...
out for the year.
Poof, gone. Brandon Brooks, we don't know how he's going to recover from Achilles surgery. Jason Kelsey was contemplating retirement to an extent.
He was hurt.
And he was hurt.
He was there practice 1, by the way, and he didn't have to be.
Yeah, Jason Kelsey and Malik Jackson are very similar players. They definitely love being at OTAs because...
I just thought that was... this isn't a shot at the other guys, but that, he doesn't have...
Deshaun's there,
Jason
too?
Kelsey doesn't have to show up at all if he doesn't want to.
Right. Deshaun was there, too.
Yeah,
I thought that was pretty impressive. Yeah. Vinny Curry was there. Tim Jernigan looks like he wants to set the world ablaze.
I was at his post practice locker session was intense.
He's ready to go. He's ready to go. I wasn't over there at the time I was interviewing. I think I was interviewing Cody Kessler at the time, but. Wonderful. He's taking it all personally. And he should.
Yeah.
I don't
think he likes that he had to get his contract declined and all that stuff.
Well, and a lot of us didn't leave him for dead, but we definitely didn't see him coming back. Yeah. He and Wisniewski are 2 guys that have a lot to prove this year, and they're going about it the right way, I think. I said hi to Wisniewski. I said, "Hey man, good to see you." He goes, "Great to be back." he's a guy that was outspoken about hating his role.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that's really willing to deliver. I also don't think he's that good of a right guard, which is why I think
more backup center, yeah.
He's a backup center, he's a backup
I'll say it was strange. It was a little strange that Zach Brown wasn't there, but, I mean, he's a veteran.
Yeah, Brown, I could see if they're trying to get him back in conditioning. Like, he's only been in the offseason program for like a week or so, I think. So,
and also, speaking of linebackers, Bradham has some injury. I think a hand or something, somebody said. Or
I
saw
don't know.
Jeff McClain had it in I think, one of his stories. That one came out of nowhere.
Well, he had a hand injury in the playoffs,
maybe
that's what it was. But
I think that's what I saw. I'm not 100% on that.
We don't know that for a fact.
And
so
it's early. It's not like worth worrying about.
Well, yeah, and I mean, the thing is, too, they wouldn't have re-signed him and restructured his deal on an injury if they didn't feel like he was going to play this season and beyond. But
I'll say one strange one was Miles Sanders not practicing like that.
Yeah.
He was full go in rookie minicamp, so I don't know what happened. But
yeah, sometimes you tweak a knee.
But I'll say Jordan Howard, I mean, he's not like crazy fast or anything, but he was looking pretty good out there.
Yeah, he actually looked thinner than when he first got to. I mean, everybody says that because you have the optics. But
and then this is Donnell Pumphrey's time to shine because he always looks shifty this time of the year, and you trick yourself into thinking he's like a good running back, and then it gets to training camp in the preseason, and they don't even play him at all.
I was sitting next to, I think, Dave Zingaro from NBC Philly, and I went, oh, man. Because Pumphrey just, like, zigged and zagged through line. I'm like, oh.
He got a lot of touches.
He did. Well, I mean,
because when they put Thorson or Cody Kessler in there, they pretty much just handed it off. So it was him and, like, Boston Scott for that.
Yeah, and those were the two main returners, too, for the day. They've actually got a lot of options. I got an article coming out on Saturday, but they've got a lot of options at kick returner. So that should be interesting. You had a couple of, what ifs and some questions for us, didn't you?
Yeah, so, I mean, we covered a lot of the OTA stuff, but so give me, like, one overreaction you have coming out of OTA. Like, you can overreact as much as you want because we're telling people that we're overreacting. Like, whether a good or a bad thing.
Camus Grugier-Hill is definitely a starter. 100%. He was the only guy that was consistent with the first team throughout the practices.
You mean, like, so you mean in, like, their base defense, or do you mean he's, like, their number 2 linebacker?
He's, at worst, their number 2 linebacker.
Oh, so you think he's ahead of Zach Brown?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that he's going to have a heavy role. I mean, it could have been that he was the only experienced guy that had starting experience in that first group. It was him and Nate Gary originally, and then they rotated Warlow and LJ Ford in there. But I think he's going to be the starting weak side linebacker this year, for sure. I think the reason why I think that he's more likely than Zach Brown is I could see Nigel Bradham being the Mike in nickel, and they play nickel so much that could be the case. I also think they like Camus' speed. He's cheap. So if they wanted to extend him down the road, there's not really a precedent of paying him a lot of money. And, he's a guy that I think they want to develop because maybe Nigel Bradham's not here next year. So, that's my overreaction.
All right, mine, I'm sticking with Dallas Goedert. I'm convinced that he's going to be higher in the pecking order than Nelson Aguilar this season.
Oh, that's not a huge...
I mean, for the slot receiver or the number 2 tight end, like it's pretty rare for that to be a thing.
Sure.
Unless you're the Patriots.
Yeah, that's true. But they are going to have probably more of a Patriots-like offense now that they know what they got.
I mean, it again, just looking like without Alshon Jeffery practicing, like it's ridiculous how many weapons they have. If everybody stays healthy, including Wentz, like this offense should be at the 2017 level, if not better.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah.
Speaking of Jeffery.
What?
Speaking of Jeffrey.
Oh, yeah. We can get into that. So
Segues.
I was like, oh, yeah, we're talking about that.
Yeah.
I also wrote about it. But so there was like a sporting news ranking. They do a lot of rankings. I generally don't agree with them, I would say.
I would say the majority of
They did a coach one today, too, that fired some people up because Doug Peterson was all the way at 7. Yeah. And he's either beaten or won as many or more Super Bowls than everybody ahead of him besides Belichick.
McVay was at 2.
Yeah, the obsession, man.
Blows my mind.
We're not getting into that discussion because... everybody agrees with us on that one, I think. Maybe not everybody, but in Philly, people listening to this podcast agree with us. But so Alshon Jeffery, they did a top 25 wide receiver list. Let me pull up the players I was particularly alarmed that they had. Alshon Jeffery wasn't listed is the main thing. And I think you and I can both be in absolute agreement that he's one of the 25 best receivers in the NFL, right?
Yes, but it's not as
I think he's in the back half of it, but
it's not as clean cut as a lot of people.
Well, it's more than the numbers with him. Like, you have to look at beyond the numbers when you're
right. If you wanted to look
Jeffery.
at the numbers last year, I think he finished 28th or 29th in yardage, and then he
did miss 3 games, but
right. I'll get there.
Just saying.
And he was ranked 29th by Pro Football Focus. Here's the thing, though. He missed 3 games. He was projected over that span to go over 1,000 yards. Yeah. There were 20 wide receivers that went over 1,000 yards. Here's why it's kind of delicate, right? So 25, you have to be a number 1 wide receiver. And I think the issue is with Jeffery, he's probably not an ideal number 1. He's definitely not their number 1 receiver because Zack Ertz is clearly that guy. He's the number 1 wide receiver. But so I can see the argument that you would make for that. That said, I don't think I don't think you can put a value on his big play ability. It's not about how many plays he makes. It's about when he makes those plays and how he makes those plays. I think Jeffrey's probably a top 25. I don't know if I'd put him in the top 20 or the top 15, but he's definitely a top 25.
Well, so there's a stat that our friend Kevin Kincaid from Crossing Broad found.
That guy.
And it kind of like tells you like exactly what he's good at. So in 2018, he had an average separation of 2.5 yards per target, which is not much. Right. That's like really low.
Yeah.
That means he's not getting any space to operate.
Well, he's not
yet he still caught 70% of his passes last season. Mm-hmm. The only 2 other players to have that short of a stretch between them and that high of a percentage of catches, 70% or more, was DeAndre Hopkins and OJ Howard. So the idea being that he catches almost all of his 50-50 balls. That's why him and Nick Foles are such a good pairing, because Nick Foles kind of just throws it up and he goes up and gets it. He's really good on the sideline. I think he's pretty good after the catch once he's hard to bring down. Again, he's not a DeAndre Hopkins, he's not Antonio Brown, I get that, but he's much more than his number. The defense has to account for him when he's out there, and that opens things up for Zack Ertz. Zack Ertz probably doesn't have as good of a season if Alshon Jeffery's not next to him.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I mean, some of the guys that they had ahead of him that I was, especially for some of these younger guys, they had Mike Williams from the Chargers, who I like, but he's had one season where he had 600 yards. Is his best season so far.
That's a projection.
That's a projection. DJ Moore, that's a projection. He's fast. He only had 2 touchdowns and less yards and less catches. Tyler Lockett.
No.
Oh no! I point to him because it's something you have to factor in. You mentioned how they have Zack Ertz as the number 1 guy, so his numbers aren't going to look as good when you have other good players around you. Tyler Lockett, Doug Baldwin was a shell of himself last year, and they have no other pass catching options in Seattle. So Lockett had more yards and touchdowns than Jeffery.
Well, where's the factor too in this guy played with a torn shoulder for an entire season his first year, and then he
still had some of the best catches I've ever seen in the playoffs. He's a gamer.
I mean, he had
the Super Bowl.
I mean, he had one of the best wide receiver postseasons we can remember.
That highlight reel, I watched it. I'm still amazed. The touchdown catch he had in the Super Bowl was amazing. He had, I think, the Vikings game. He had another insane one.
And I think outside of maybe Kelsey and Peters, he's probably the most respected player on offense too. How many people say that about a wide receiver?
As I wrote in my story, it's almost any other player, he has a drop that pretty much ends their season against the Bears. Mm-hmm. We weren't talking about
Saints.
Against the Saints, sorry, I keep thinking Bears. If it had been the Bears, it would have been worse because all the stuff he said. But
best hands in the league.
Well, I was talking more about I only went to Chicago for work. I love Philly or whatever it was.
Thanks for putting him on blast.
No, I mean that was a great quote.
It was.
So he drops that catch, and not only do his teammates immediately come out and support him, but the fan base, a Philly fan base that is not very forgiving if you blow something at the end, and that hasn't even been a storyline this offseason. Usually, if the season didn't necessarily end because of that play, but it ended on that play, and it hasn't even been. I mean, I'm sure when we talk to Alshon eventually this offseason, it'll come up. But I think that says a lot about the respect everybody in this city has for Alshon Jeffery.
He's one of the realest players I think I've ever covered.
That's he doesn't say much, but he says what he's thinking. It's not even necessarily subtle, but just the way he he'll just say what he's thinking. He's like, oh, right. Yeah.
Jason Peters is kind of that way.
And he's the one who declared, I forget who it was that told the story of declaring that they were going to win the Super Bowl before the season in 2017.
The interview about being
it resurfaces every now and then.
He's one of the best.
If you haven't seen it, it's where it's somehow a guy got a one-on-one with him in Minneapolis. The media thing is insane there, obviously, because there's so many reporters, and he's asking about the weather. He's it's in a dome, and there's and the best was he's asked because Justin Timberlake was having a concert or something. he's he's just a celebrity. What are you gonna meet him or something? Why do I need to meet him? He's just like you and me, breathe the same air as I do. And they're just shutting this guy down, and it's it still blows up. It's almost 2 years.
Something that I think is universal to Philly too. Just going from another team and having obviously covered road games and stuff. Eagles players want to know the why of your question. Why are you asking this
Michael
question?
Bennett was big on that.
Yeah, Chris Long once deadpan to me, and I it's the first time I've been really shook in a one-on-one opportunity, and he goes, I'm not going to rank my defense. I asked him about how great of a job Jim Schwartz is doing with all these injuries on defense. He goes, I'm not going to rank my defensive coordinators, and I just froze, and I was just that's not what I was asking, but I guess this interview is over. Just a very, very interesting. Oh, do we even talk about Chris yet?
No, we can end with him because I guess since our last podcast, he announced his retirement in a very Chris Long way, late Saturday night, with a photo of a red Solo cup with a beautiful landscape in the background.
Yeah,
he didn't say the words "I'm retiring," so it was wait, he's retiring, right? And it was confirmed and blah blah blah. And he's now he's gone all in on just saying what he thinks on Twitter, which is great. He's talked about how he smoked weed I don't know about smoked weed, but he used marijuana because you don't know if he was eating edibles or something.
Yeah,
I'm not making it. I'm not.
He's keeping his words.
Making assumptions, but I mean he's been arguing for how players marijuana shouldn't be as punishable as it is in the NFL. That's not another discussion. But
and to crystallize that, a player once told me they know when the tests are coming, so either you're an idiot or...
I think you only do the marijuana ones once a year too, right?
Right.
I think that's what Chris has been arguing.
The quote was, you're either an idiot if you get caught or you have a serious problem. That was I
mean, and the point is being that it shouldn't be an issue of having, getting caught, blah, blah, blah. But anyway, so Chris Long announced his retirement. This is something we've kind of figured was coming for a while. He said they told him he was going to have a smaller role. I don't even think that was an offensive thing to him. It was more you have all these guys coming back, so he wasn't going to play as much as he did last year. Mm-hmm. And
the thing is too is Malik Jackson being the 3 technique. You don't need to move Brandon Graham inside, which is where Chris Long would typically come on the field and have his most action.
I mean, we've talked a bit about the concerns about defensive end, and I think we both agree it's more if somebody gets injured problem than a talent problem. Yeah. Even not necessarily depth. The fourth defensive end, the snaps are kind of skewed from last year because Derek Barnett got hurt. So it looks like there was 4 guys who played a lot, but in reality it was just Bennett, Graham, and Chris Long.
But even when they did have a fully healthy unit the year before, he played 48% of the snaps. That's a heavy snap load. But that said, again, with Brandon Graham not moving inside, that's going to change that role. I would expect them to typically get maybe 20% of the snaps. About... let's say they play 60 snaps a game. That's 15 snaps a game. So I'm terrible at math. You can check the math at home. You can correct us in the comment section. So that's actually probably 25%. So that's 25%. So 12 snaps. I think that's actually right. Go me.
I hope it is now.
Yeah, I do too. 12 snaps a game, that's good for developmental defensive end. They have Josh Sweat. They have Sharif Miller. They like Joe Osman.
I think Love would be the right one for you.
Yeah. Well, but some part of me is just kind of maybe he's that guy that's the perennial practice squad player, or he's the new Steven
Or he's going to get 20 sacks this year. Could go either way.
Yeah, I mean, he's an interesting guy. He's got a pretty loyal following.
He's bulked up, too.
Dude's jacked. He looks huge. Yeah.
He's short. He kind of has to be because he's smaller than everybody else.
Yeah. But, there are small defensive ends that are done well. Yeah. Look at Phillip Hunt. Look at
Elvis Dumerville.
I was putting him more on a lower level. But,
that was just the first one that came to my head, though.
Trent Cole was
pretty good.
Pretty good. He came into the league at 230. So, I mean... The problem isn't a talent issue at all. It's they have Derek Barnett, who's coming off shoulder surgery. They have Brandon Graham, who's over 30. And then behind them, they have Vinny Curry, who's over 30 and not really necessarily that prolific of a pass rusher. So that's their 3 guys that are proven. Behind them, they have 4 guys that have played a combined 12 games. And combined for...
And most of that is like DeSean Hall, pretty much.
Right. And have... Well, actually, no. He's only played 4 games.
Oh, he didn't really play for the Panthers, huh?
No, he played 1 game for the Panthers. Josh Sweat played 9 games and had 1 tackle.
Yeah.
So
Hall had a half a sack. So they had a half a sack between the 4 of them.
Yeah, so that's the problem is you're fine with them taking 12 to 15 snaps a game. The issue is let's say Derek Barnett has a
shoulder
issue.
He didn't practice either, by the way.
Right. He was out there in the uniform, though. Let's say Brandon Graham has injures his ankle for 2 games. Cool, you can have Vinny Curry start, but this is a platoon defense. And especially on the defensive line, Malik Jackson can play in.
I wonder at that point how much they make him almost a full-time defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, that's the benefit of having Timmy Jernigan and Hassan Ridgeway. That said, you don't want Malik playing defensive end all game.
I mean, as you pointed out with the offensive line, you don't want to make 2 positions worse.
Correct.
We as much as Tim Jernigan is motivated, we don't know where he's at.
Exactly. And, we both like Trayvon Hester. I'm really intrigued by Hassan Ridgeway. I liked him coming out of college. You have to have a guy who's athletic. I think Josh Sweat can be the guy, but they have to give him the opportunities to do that. You know what I mean?
Those guys, Miller and him, are getting a lot of snaps in the preseason. Like you're going to say, I mean, they need to at least.
Miller. So what's intriguing about the 2 of them, and not to go off on a tangent, but like they're very different players. Josh Sweat is an extremely athletic, long guy. Miller is like a brick house. Like he's a big end, and so. Both of them are very raw, but they're raw for different reasons. Miller kind of has to develop pass rushing moves. Sweat kind of has to get used to playing a 4-3 defensive front again, just because he was so mishandled at FSU. They made him basically a 5 technique. So basically, they used him, had he gained weight, he could have been like Malik Jackson, but he hasn't. And he's a very lanky guy, so he needs to win with speed and burst. So it'll be interesting to see how the 2 of them battle. DeSean Hall, Osman, they're unique fits too. We'll see. Derek Morgan's still out there. He's the one guy that makes sense to me.
Yeah, the rest of them are very uninspiring, but that's like a 4th guy.
Yeah, I would never have Derek Morgan start out like above Vinny Curry or anything like that.
I will say the Eagles, back to Chris Long before we tap out, they are going to miss his presence in that locker room.
For sure.
I'd argue he might, if not the number 1, he was one of the top 3 most liked guys in that locker room.
Absolutely.
You saw that Walter Payton campaign. The guys are still wearing shirts. You saw the guys coming out in support. Like, in just 2 years, it feels like he was here longer than 2 years because Philly embraced him. He embraced Philly. The locker room absolutely loved him. I mean, Michael Bennett, who, isn't always easy to get along with, they were like best friends. Like, they're going to miss him for sure.
I mean, you and I, we've acknowledged before, we grew up following this team. We know this team pretty well. I can't think of a guy who had it. I mean, Connor Barwin was here for 4 years. He's maybe the closest guy to having like a short stint and really great. It's like him, LeGarrette Blount, and Chris Long are the 3 guys that...
Like the short time became fan favorites sort of.
Right. Like people will remember them forever.
Long more than the other 2 guys, pretty clearly too. Yeah. All right, we'll end on that note. And Golden Tate, of course.
Yeah, Golden Tate, Giants fan.
He's going to get his jersey number retired here. All right, well, I'm sure we'll make fun of Golden Tate a lot this season.
Yeah, probably.
That'll come later. All right, we'll get a podcast to you guys after the next OTA practice. We weren't able to this week. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Deuces.